So my name's William Quigley. As you probably didn't hear from Brock, Brock and I have been partners for many years in various businesses. The last 6 years, cryptos. I've been a venture capitalist for many years. I was a co-founder of something called Idea Lab Capital. For all the guys with the gray hair in the audience, I see a few of you. We were the first really big incubator. Bill Gross created it and did marvelous things, really transformed Los Angeles from a backwater, from the consumer and internet tech standpoint to the forefront. So I've got a few slides here this morning, and then I will cut to Q&A. I never know the degree of familiarity with crypto space in general. I would like to just ask one question of the audience. How many of you have gotten interested and focused on cryptos within the last 12 months? Okay, decent amount. All right, the last 12 months have been incredibly valuable. And I'm going to push the arrow there. All right. See if These are all the buzzwords. We all know them: blockchain tokens, coins, ICOs. Any one of these areas you could spend years and years on. We're only going to spend a few minutes today. I'm going to try to touch on the things that are most important to me as an incubator of cryptos, as a merchant. I have a company, I'm the CEO of a company, which I believe is one of the largest users of cryptos for payments. And then, of course, what industry or what industries I believe most perfectly are suited for the use of cryptos. This is the state, I would say, not just of the consumer market, but also of the business market when it comes to blockchains, tokens, and everything else. Most people are not very sure what it is. They know it's interesting, it's got their attention. I do a lot of presentations at industry trade shows, the National Retail Association, the American Gambling Association, the American Banking Association. Lots of people have lots of questions about what it is, but while this is a good-sized room and crowd, most of us in the room today are interested in building something, not necessarily in using it. And the use cases, by the way, if there's one thing I want you to think about throughout today and when you leave, use cases are the thing that we need to focus on now. Think of it a little bit like the internet before the Mosaic browser. You could fumble on it, you could do okay, then American Online made it easy, and that's where we created 2 trillion of value in about 8 years. So the good news is for everybody here, it hasn't begun yet. How many wallets do you think are out there? How many crypto wallets? 10 million, 50 million? Anyone have a guess? 27 million? Yeah, I think it's in the high 20s. How many wallets, that's globally, across all coins, how many wallets are used? By used, I mean accessed at least once a week. It's about 3 million. 7 billion worldwide consumers, 3 million people using wallets. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but I focus on consumer internet, consumer technology. This is like looking at an AS400 computer mainframe in 1987 and thinking, I wonder if small, compact, easy to use computers would be helpful. And if we build those, what's going to happen? That is where we are today. When people ask me, are we too late? Hell no. We've just started fumbling through the capabilities of the technology. Pretty soon we'll be able to start figuring out what the use cases are. Yeah. So the promise of this, which is what got me excited about it in 2011, I wasn't mining like the early guys. I did mine, Brock and I did, but the promise of it is what blew me away and attracted me. Let's see if we can get here. That's a nice rainbow, and hopefully these things are sometimes a little slow. I'm not even quite, there we go. So these words, every one of these words, is important. The trustless piece I think all of you get, or most of the people working here. By the way, I got this really well to a point I incubated about 40 so far, 40 blockchain companies. But I'm going to tell you, even though I've done all that, the most basic part of cryptos escaped me until I needed to build a company that had millions of customers across the world and small payments. That's when this became really important to me, the immutability. I co-founded with a couple of guys I think here, a payment processing company, crypto payment processing company. And we had a lengthy PowerPoint about all the values of using cryptos, many of the words here that were there. The only one that really matters is immutable. Because the number one issue in cross-border payments, and make no mistake, this is about cross-border payments, is immutability / chargebacks. For anyone in the e-commerce space, you basically go out of business often when you're early and you don't have a great fraud department because of chargebacks. When you don't allow that, when they're immutable, it changes the whole way you can market and which consumers you can even go after. So this is the good stuff. The reality is that today, at least the crypto blockchains that we are all using, we're really only using one in a big way, which is Bitcoin. Obviously, Ethereum is getting there, Litecoin. For those of you who like dogs, Dogecoin. This is the state. We just got done with SegWit. Maybe someone's going to talk about that later today. I'm not going to jump into it except to say, you know, we're all a little bit worried that the miners, we're not going to get together and decide what the next improvement in the blockchain should be. But it's very slow. The speed is so slow, it's amazing to me we use it. We do because of all those things I talked about before. About 4 transactions a second is I think what it does. I think the theoretical limit is about 7 transactions a second. This is a global network, keep that in mind. Any given block will hold about 1,800 transactions. Every block takes between 10 and 15 minutes to process. So if you need even one confirmation before as a merchant you agree to allow that deposit to go through as BTC and let that person buy something, you're waiting 10 minutes at minimum. So the state of the technology is primitive and needs to improve before this thing goes big scale on the consumer side. But its promise is terrific. Here. So as I hinted at, what do cryptos do well? For me, this is all you need to create many, many, many $100 billion businesses. This is it. You've got a payment system, a payment network that's global, secured, and instant. I was a early investor, the first institutional investor in PayPal, and I know a lot about payments. I was actually a bank auditor in the 1980s. I know a lot. The concept of instant payments, especially when you're in the United States, didn't really impress upon me how important that was until I was actually a merchant doing real transactions, hundreds of millions of dollars of transactions per month. It turns out there is no instant payment system that's been invented up until Bitcoin when you're doing cross-border. Think about that. You say, well, I've got ACH. Yep, international ACH is 2.5 days to clear. Wire, internationally, at best, it's a day, but it could be 2 to 3 days. It turns out the only, not instant, but in a matter of hours payment you can actually process cross-border is by getting a bunch of cash, putting it in a briefcase and hopping on a plane and delivering it. And that's why, to some of you this will be surprising, that's why that's done. That's why people hop on planes with lots of cash or diamonds or gold and go and deliver it, because you can actually do it the same day. And once you give it to the guy, it's probably immutable. This here, this is it. This is at least the state for coins. And you've got a blockchain, you've got the coins. I think some of you are probably focused on blockchain stuff. Some of you are still really interested in the coin stuff. I'm very interested in the coins because that's what drives global commerce. I like the blockchain, and as I'll talk about in a little bit, you're not going to make money directly investing in the blockchain. It's the services of the blockchain, right? So that requires a little bit of work. But don't forget this, global, secured, and instant. And as I've been hinting, the number one issue with something like that, 7 billion people in the world, why are there only 3 million wallets that actually do stuff? I mean, that's like a really tiny payment processor. And the reason is because the consumer mass market has not taken off. And the reason the consumer mass market has not taken off, I think, are these reasons here. This is the stuff that gets me excited: anonymous, decentralized, secured, and cheap. We'll talk about cheap in a second. Of all of these, anonymous usually means unsafe to the consumer. Decentralized, anyone who's had a problem on a crypto exchange knows support sucks. Unscalable and inconvenient. So I will tell you the secret to all of my successful internet investing in the last 20 years. And it started with one thing above all else: convenience. If your product is aimed at consumers and it's not convenient, it's going to fail. I can't tell you how many times that lesson has been learned and relearned again. Convenience is everything in the consumer market. This is just anonymity. I thought I'd throw it out there. That was when the anarchists ran the blockchain. This was the thing everybody talked about. I've talked to regulators, I've pitched banks. This was the thing that scared them. In the world of anti-money laundering legislation and whatnot, anonymity is not good. The reality is, these things are as anonymous as you want. You want to withdraw money off of Coinbase? Anyone who's tried to do that, what do you think about anonymity? They don't like it. So this problem, if you want to call it that, has really been solved. As I've mentioned, convenience matters most. The reason why we have 3 million wallets today and not, let's say, 500 million wallets in use is because they're a bitch. And of course, the scariest thing, even now, after years and years of processing payments in the wallets I use, I get a little nervous when I hit send because there's no safety blanket. You know, in the early days of Ethereum, the like sophisticated Ethereum, if you want to call it that, world, you could put in an Ethereum wallet a digit or two less than you were supposed to when you did a copy and paste. And instead of it saying, hey, you didn't put in the right number of alphanumerics in your address, it would just go away. It would go into purgatory forever. Think about that. That is not convenient. And of course, focusing on something that matters to the consumers. This type of event is necessarily going to be kind of tech heavy, where we're talking about the capabilities we can do. If we want to make this really successful as a phenomenon, we need to focus on what the consumer can do with whatever the complex smart contract we've developed. And this goes to another key point besides convenience. I want to drill that one in. Tool versus products. I know when I'm not going to make an investment when I get pitched on a tool. Look what this Swiss Army knife can do. Look what this cool widget can do. I have no interest in that. I want to know, what does it do specifically? If it does more than two things, I'm probably not interested. And it turns out neither are consumers. There is, I try to have a picture of a cat in every presentation I do. So why is there an Ethereum symbol in a picture of a cat? Because when you hear the Ethereum developers, and I love them all, talk about how cool Ethereum is, it reminds me of a couple of baristas talking about what they can do with coffee. I can make coffee with the cat picture, right? I'm not sure anyone cares, but I can do it. The amazing creativity that's gone into smart contracts, which is essentially all Ethereum is, just putting a set of rules on a piece of money and it does what those rules say. To me, it's a little bit like putting cool cat pictures on a cup of coffee. It's cool and it really gets the attention of developers, but I don't think it's a business. Coffee as a business, if I can get there, is this, right? So this is, we don't care about where you're planting it and how you're getting it, whatever, but it's pretty consistent. You sell coffee. You don't sell, you can do anything else with the coffee other than drink it. So when you're all working with developers and you're looking at all the cool ICOs and all the amazing template technology they have, keep asking yourself, what's the use case? Here. I always like this machine. One thing really, really, really well. That's what Bitcoin is, by the way, for me. Bitcoin is, when you think about it, it's the dumb coin. It's a coin, not a token. Token has intelligence. A coin just is dumb. But it's immutable, and it was very cheap. Anyone know what the Bitcoin miners are charging right now to send a transaction? No? So my company does about 10,000 transactions to consumers with BTC per 24-hour period. While that wouldn't be that impressive normally, for a typical e-commerce site, that's actually a lot for cryptos. And up until about 24 hours ago, I was paying $1.50 a transaction. It's in the last 2 months, it's gone from a few cents to $1.50. And one of the things that none of us have ever thought of when you send a wire or you use a Venmo or you you send a PayPal, has anyone ever asked you, when would you like it there? Like a post office, right? No one's ever asked me that. I just assume the darn thing's going to get there as soon as it can. That's what's very fascinating about Bitcoin and the blockchain right now. They kind of ask you, when do you want it? And if you don't bribe them with a fairly high miner fee, it may not get done for a week. And a lot of people don't realize that. And so you kind of got to give more than you think the average guy is giving. P.S. Right now, a great entrepreneur created a cool service that tells you what the bribe should be at the current moment of network congestion. But you see why that's not very convenient? That you have to think about, wait a minute, I'm just sending a PayPal or I'm just sending a payment to you. Yeah, what do you want to pay for me to get it there? I don't know. That's the problem. So this is, I think, the last bit of slide here. You've got, right now, Ethereum, and again, I love it. I was part of the crowd sale, very happy with it, very happy with a lot of the capabilities. But for this stuff to be important, we as entrepreneurs need to turn it into services, which, as I mentioned, is not there yet. But if you're going to turn this stuff into a service, what you have to decide is, what is the perfect application? Let's start with Bitcoin. Perfect application. And I'm going to give you what I think is the perfect application. It is a set of customers who are globally distributed, who like to make transactions multiple times a day, don't have a ton of money, but a decent amount. They're technically proficient, and they don't want to spend a ton of money because the transactions they do are about 10 bucks each. So today, if you go to any processor, global payment processor, and you say, I'd like to do $5 transactions in 150 countries where virtually everyone is cross-border, the buyer and the seller, the recipient and the sender, and I don't want to pay much at all. They'd say, yeah, you know, call Elon Musk, you know, maybe he can invent something. It doesn't exist. But there is an industry like that needs it. For want of a better term, I would call them digital marketplaces. These are marketplaces, and they're all over the world right now, that only sell virtual or digital items. They're eBay, but just for digital items. Where those are particularly pronounced is in the video gaming industry. This is a picture, by the way, of the esports phenomenon. There are about 400 million MMOG, massive multiplayer online gaming players globally. 400 million millennials, people between maybe 15 and 25 years old, very sophisticated when it comes to trading virtual items. They almost always do it cross-border, and they're small dollar transactions. They are eating up Bitcoin. They absolutely love Bitcoin because there's no other way for them to send a $5 transaction without it costing $3 to send it. And oh, by the way, the guy they send it to can charge it back. So very simple use case, hundreds of millions of people who want to do it. Nothing else works but Bitcoin. Soon, I hope, Ethereum. These are what I call private blockchains. All of these, if you're in the video game industry, are like, yeah, whatever. If you're not, you may not know what they are. All of these networks, they're very big, allow people to send virtual items, digital items back and forth cross-border, and they do it on their own network, effectively a blockchain. This is where you could blow all this up and just put it all on the blockchain. Maybe it'll be Ethereum, maybe it'll be another, maybe it'll be EOS, I don't know. But this is where you see a case for using these coins, which means, frankly, in the United States, paying for a cup of coffee at a Starbucks, it's probably not the use case. When I started investing in cryptos, my focus was almost all on rest of world, particularly the developing world. And what happened in the last 6 months in Russia, China, India, where there's a few people in this world, all of those governments have gone from Bitcoin and blockchain are evil to we need to open it up. As some of you may know, in Japan, which didn't have a this is evil element to it, but it was we don't know. Japan has really pushed it in the last 3 or 4 months to a point where there are now 300,000 retailers in Japan who said, we're going to start accepting cryptos. And with that, I'm going to conclude my comments, and I can take a few questions. Oh, the minor transaction fee. Why do I call it a bribe? Well, I call it a bribe because I kind of never know what I have to pay, and I never know what I'm going to get. But I do know if I don't pay it, yeah, hey, you know, we may get it there, we may not. So you're always having to kind of guess. And I'll sit there when we're doing large block transactions with with my trading operation, and the trader will say, what do you want to pay? And I'll say, I don't know, 200 bucks. Okay, that's what I mean by the bribe. It's not formalized. You know, there should be somebody there who says, hey, you know, but remember, decentralized. Some words are just, we naturally are accustomed to them being attractive. Decentralized in some ways is cool. It's local control, it's flexible, but it also means no one knows what the hell is going on. When I want centralized is when I'm trying to get my airline reservation figured out. I want someone who sees the whole landscape and says, hey, this is what's going on. So, and I'll keep saying it, I love cryptos, I love the various blockchains, but we have to figure out where the particular traits of cryptos and blockchains are well suited. And we can't just force fit them onto everything we do. Because frankly, PayPal and Visa and American Express are perfectly good for most things. You in the back? What will happen with the fee?
My two questions. What will happen when the Bitcoin start like reaching the $1 trillion? What will happen with the fee?
Yep.
Because it's in Bitcoins. So if we're talking about a trillion market cap, we're talking about a huge fee in fiat. And what do you think? Because I think that the crypto of the future does not have a fee, such a Nimic or something like IOTA or something like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll quickly answer those two. And by the way, the beautiful thing is here, no one knows what the hell is going to happen. So I'm guessing just like everybody else. But first is, what happens when Bitcoin hits $1 trillion? I think, well, I'm betting that it will. I'm betting that it will for one particular reason. The global GDP is about 90 trillion. Call it 20, 25 trillion of that is cross-border stuff. For Bitcoin to be relevant, it needs to be able to actually do a fair amount of commerce. If the entire market cap of Bitcoin is 50 billion, it's pretty hard for everybody to be using it. Everybody's going to need to grab it and then use it and grab it and then use it. So it's an argument almost in reverse. If it's not $1 trillion, it can't have a meaningful impact on the global GDP. And because of how powerful it is for cross-border transactions, and we all know globalization is going up, I think it needs to be and it will be worth $1 trillion. As far as fees go, no one thought about fees or talked about fees when we had a proof of work model. Now we're migrating to proof of stake. Proof of stake is still very, very early, right? Ethereum keeps saying, hey, we're going to do proof of stake. And proof of stake is basically a fee-based system. What I love about capitalism is it always drives towards efficiency. I believe we will get to a point where transaction fees are back again to nobody cares. With SegWit and I think now the lack of a fork that will happen on August 1st. I think Bitcoin Unlimited and Bitcoin Core have just kind of reached an armistice, so we won't fork. I think SegWit 2 is going to come along, and I believe at some point the fees are going to drop by about 75%, which for anyone who's doing consumer stuff is super valuable. Maybe one more question? All right, last question.
Yep. Hi. Okay, this is sort of a think tank question. Imagine 5 years in the future, people are going to be completely enamored of this anarchy, decentralization. We're taking institutions out of it. We're transferring wealth and doing transactions without the banks. What else is in that future landscape?
Okay, I think you could all hear that. So the way I'm going to answer the question about do you have a whole disconnected system without the banks and da-da-da-da, I'll answer it this way. We all know the value of the blockchain, Bitcoin. It's anonymous. It is decentralized, and it is cheap. What is the most valuable crypto company on planet Earth? It's Coinbase. Coinbase, US company, which is a wallet, an exchange, and da-da-da, but it's Coinbase. What is Coinbase? It's centralized. Their shit's not on the blockchain. They do not allow anonymity. You don't want to reveal who you are, they will not work with you. And it's 2.9% per transaction. Think about that one. So why do people use it? It's immutable. That's the one thing, no chargeback. So it's funny, all these powerful elements of cryptos, one little thing here causes people to use it. And all the great stuff that some of us think is useful, to most consumers probably isn't. I think. All I'll say about regulation is 2011, 12, 13, I loved it. It was, no one knows what it is, no one cares. When Mt. Gox went and got hacked, I actually now, with Brock, own the Mt. Gox corporation, minus the tokens. Japan was like, we don't even want to talk about it. We don't even consider it real. We don't care. It was an absence of concern. By 2015, it had swung to severe government restrictions from a regulatory standpoint. I was worried it might just be snuffed out. Go forward a year and a half, with Ethereum and the power of Ethereum, governments around the world are now, even Canada, which was very anti-crypto, are saying we need to invest in this and support this. So I think the regulatory pressures are now going to relax, and it's going to be easier. Number one problem for a crypto company is getting a bank account. It's like in the pod industry, you can't get it. Little by little, that's starting to become possible. All right, guys, I think I got to go. Thank you.
All right, cool.